All right, y'all, it is the release everyone has been waiting for what seems like forever. I am here today to do a review of Onyx Storm and a recap of Fourth Wing and Iron Flame so that you can start your journey for Onyx Storm. I don't want to tell you guys too much, but I'm going to say that I finished it within 2 days and I I have no words. But I will talk more about it in the review, so let's get started. Okay, so I want to start off with my Fourth Wing recap. Fourth Wing starts off with Violet Sorrengail as her mother is forcing her to go to Basgiath's War College, even though Violet has been training her whole entire life to be a scribe, so this is basically a death sentence for Violet. Mira, Violet's older sister, is trying to change her mother's mind but can't, and so they get into this huge argument. You find out that Violet's father was a scribe, and her older brother Brennan was also at Basgiath's War College. He graduated, but he's dead now, and so is her father. So at the entrance to the War College, Violet must cross something called the parapet in order to be an initiate, or I think that's what they call them. Anyway, it's this like really narrow, long bridge where there's no railings. It's raining when she does hers, so it's super slippery and they could easily fall to their death. So we're introduced to Xaden, whose father was like basically a traitor, and Xaden's like considered this dark and don't get involved with him kind of guy. His father was executed by Violet's mother, so there's some tension there already. And we're also introduced to Rhiannon, who is going to be Violet's best friend. And then Jack Barlow, who is the mortal enemy for all of us. After successfully crossing the parapet, Violet meets up with Dane, who was her best friend at some point and could be potential romantic fling. Violet is placed in Xaden's squad along with Rhiannon and begins her training. She meets the dragons, who literally incinerate people in front of them. She ends up sparring with other recruits who she poisons so that she can get a leg up because she's so weak and frail. And then facing the gauntlet, which she loses a friend named Aurelie and then passes the gauntlet only on a technicality. At Threshing, Violet bonds with two dragons. We have Terran and Andarna. Andarna is this tiny little feathertail. Most of the time they don't see feathertails around, so they consider them this rare breed, but they're not really meant for fighting. Terran is one of the last black dragons, so he's super rare and everybody's crazy and mind blown that Violet bonds with him. Xaden's dragon, her name is Sigale, is mated with Terran. So basically, Xaden and Violet are now on this next level kind of thing where they can hear each other's thoughts because of their mated dragons. And now they end up like in this weird romantic thing. So they end up falling in love, and that's where the romance starts in this novel. Violet is basically also trying to track down a copy of fairy tales that her father had gifted her a long time ago, and asked a scribe friend for help, but the scribe friend says that no one she's talked to has ever heard of that book. We learn that once bonded, humans develop signets because of dragons' powers, and humans can't survive without their bonded dragon. One fellow student developed the ability to hear people's thoughts, and this is basically called an intrinsic, and his neck is immediately snapped because it's illegal to have that signet, even though it's not really his fault. So Violet has many assassination attempts on her life after bonding with two dragons, and she finds out that she's able to stop time because of Andarna, and we find out that Andarna is actually a baby dragon and hasn't reached full maturity yet. Violet and Xaden's team both go to an outpost where Violet's sister is stationed. There they get attacked by griffins and their riders, who are enemies of Navarre. This is part of something, when they go to the outpost, it's part of something called the War Games, which is the end of the year thing. And part of the War Games ends up with Violet blowing Jack Barlow off a cliff, and he dies. For the final task in the War Games, Violet goes with Xaden to another posting. So for the final task of the War Games, Violet learns that Xaden is friends with the Griffin Riders, and he's trying to protect them because they are essentially getting attacked by Venin, which is something that was in the Book of Fairy Tales that Violet was trying to find with the scribe. Venin were basically lore or horror stories told to children just to keep them in line. Venin are these evil people who are pulling magic from the earth and are crazy, and they ride something called Wyvern, which is essentially like a dragon, but it only has 2 legs. So they get attacked at this outposting, and we have a ton of issues where everyone's on the cusp of dying. We have this problem. Liam dies, and Violet almost dies as well because she has this poison in her from one of the venom attacks. When Violet wakes up, after the poison is out of her system, she finds out that her brother Brennan is alive, and that's basically where we leave Fourth Wing. Okay, so Iron Flame starts basically where Fourth Wing left off, and Brennan and Xaden are talking, and Violet has to reconcile with Brennan for letting her think that he was dead this whole time, and they decide that Xaden, Violet, and the rest of their team should go back to Beskar War College, basically as insiders, since they still think that they were part of the war games, that they haven't become traitors or anything like that. Violet is also given a ward stone. She just has to learn how to use it in order to protect people from the Venin and the Wyvern. We learn that Andarna is growing quickly and she must go into a deep sleep to finish the growth process soon, but we're not told when she needs to go. So when they get back at the college, it's graduation. Colonel Atos, which is Dane's father, we don't like him, is accused of sending Violet and their team to die. So he tells Violet that her sister will end up dying if this gets out to anyone that Colonel Atos sent them to an outposting to get attacked by Venin. Then he stations Xaden away from Violet, and they're only allowed to see each other once a week, and the only reason they're allowed to see each other is because their dragons are mated and can't be separated for long. And this is where we start the cycle of Violet being mad at Xaden for keeping secrets from her, and it's a back and forth thing for the whole entire book. Since Violet is now on her second year, she has to become a squad leader for the first years, including Liam's little sister, Sloane. Sloane obviously hates Violet because she thinks that Violet's the reason that Liam is dead. And Auric, I think I'm saying that wrong, he is the son of King Tori, but like one of the really younger ones. And then there's a new commander who comes to the college, and his name is Major Varish. So Violet goes back to her scribe friend to try and get help on how the wards were originally put up so that she can figure out how to work the ward stone. Through this, Violet and her team are put through various tests from the college because of their training. They have to get interrogated. Violet survives assassination attempts again, and then they come up with a plan to basically break into a royal vault because there are documents stored there that might tell them how to work ward stones. So they use Auric, who is the son, to get into that royal vault, but eventually, even after getting the documents, Violet gets taken and tortured where Dane reads her mind. She shows him about the Venin and he turns good again, so Dane releases Violet. Xaden appears just in time and helps Violet kill Major Varish, and then they show the other dragons and their riders all about the Venin and the Wyvern together to form a revolution. It was like this big thing. That was the best way I could succinctly sum it up. Because Andarna's sleep was interrupted so many times and she didn't really get a good, long, dreamless sleep, she didn't develop correctly. One of her wings is malformed, and she can potentially never carry a rider. After this, we find out that through the journals that they stole from the Royal Vault, they follow a lead that leads them to Xaden's ex-fiancée named Kat. And that's where they cross a mountain path with some griffin riders. I forget what for. And then after this, Xaden is revealed as an Intensic who can read minds. He had to keep it from everyone so he wouldn't die and get his neck snapped like the guy in the first book. After this, they find out that the ward might be down, so they hurry back to the college. Jack Barlow has turned Venin and isn't actually dead. I figured that one. And he broke the wardstone. Wyvern and Venin begin attacking their new post, and war ensues. They learn that there are 7 dragon types, not 6, and Darna is the 7th dragon type, which really blew my mind when I first read this book. And then Violet's mother sacrifices herself to restore the stone. Then we have the bomb drop of all bomb drops. Xaden has turned Venin, and he asked Jack Barlow, who is being held prisoner now after the war ends and the wardstone is reinstated by Violet's mother. We find out that Jack Barlow says there absolutely is no cure, even though we should not believe a word that Jack Barlow says. And this is how we end up at Onyx Storm. Okay, so the first part of my review is going to be a spoiler-free review, and then I'm going to go a lot into all of the spoilers that happen throughout the book because obviously I have to talk about them. So for the spoiler-free part, I just want you all to know that I am so distraught. What was that ending? Like, Rebecca Yarros literally told us that she is going on a hiatus, a writing hiatus after this novel, and she ends it like that? This is so unfair. I'm really, really upset. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the review part, and I will tell you all of my thoughts about this novel in a very non-spoiler way. So, we start the book off with Violet searching for a cure for Xaden, and also simultaneously trying to find more dragons like Andarna, because Andarna wants to find her kind. This led us to a series of different isles where they had to travel and do tests, basically, to try and find more dragons like Andarna, or a cure for Xaden. I'm gonna be honest, this part really dragged for me. It was so much information, but also the pacing felt slow and boring. In my opinion, it was an information overload, and I really couldn't sit there and process it while I was reading. It was just too much, and I really do feel like I'm gonna need to do a reread of this one because there was so much going on. It was too much, and the first half of the book just dragged because they're going from aisle to aisle to aisle to aisle, and it really felt like there was no direction besides trying to find dragons like Andarna and finding a cure for Xaden. But that wasn't enough for me. It wasn't a direction of like the rest of the book. The rest of the books had more direction than this. We knew where we were going, and not only that, but you had all of these things that kind of tied it all in. This is tied in. It was just too much. So with that being said, like I said, the first half of the book was at least the first half of the book, because that's just when I really noticed it started to pick up a little bit, was after the first half. It was so slow. I found myself pausing to do other things, or not really wanting to listen, or wondering, oh man, what do I need to do today? So for me, when a book does that, I just know it's wasn't that good in the first half. Second half picked up a lot, but the first half was not there for me. And like I said, it was confusing as heck. So trying to read through this while also being bored was, oh my gosh, it was almost like a task. And reading should not be a task. I thought that going over the first two books and recapping them would give me enough to be like, okay, I can jump into the Onyx Storm without doing a reread. I should have done a reread of Fourth Wing and Iron Flame because I was so lost and so confused with so many names and so much background and so much lore. It was just too much for me. But I will say that I have heard some people saying that even though they've reread Fourth Wing and Iron Flame multiple times, they were still confused by Onyx Storm. So maybe it's not just me. As far as writing goes, we obviously know that Rebecca Yarros has her writing style and her character development under control. I loved our characters. I love the writing. I think her writing is really well done, and it describes just enough to where you know what's going on and you can imagine the scene, but not too much to where you're like, okay, when are we going to stop talking about the trees? With that, we got a lot more romance in this novel than I feel like we did in the past two novels, and a lot more spicy scenes. Just a heads up. The great thing about this was that Xaden and Violet were not fighting the whole entire time, even though Xaden is turning Venin and he's going through all of these things, but Violet was just there supporting him. And it was really nice to see that because they bonded a lot, I feel like, through this novel. And I know a lot of people hated all of their arguing from Iron Flame, so maybe Rebecca Yarros took y'all's opinions into consideration. But other than that, for my non-spoiler review, I just want to tell y'all that the ending was absolutely crazy. I feel like by now I should expect that from Rebecca Yarros, but I still wasn't expecting it, and we had an insane cliffhanger that now I have so many questions. Even though a lot of questions got answered, now I have even more questions. But the problem is that she's not writing another book for a long time, so now we have to wait. So if you wanted to wait a few months to read this book, I would not blame you, because then that means your wait is shorter until the next book. Here's to waiting another year or two for the next novel to come out. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. I'm telling you now, if you have not read Onyx Storm, don't go any further. I am going over everything that happened in the book that really blew my mind. First, Violet makes some kind of edit to the ward stones that basically allows Griffin flyers to wield. And this was great because now everybody's kind of like equal, and then they make a peace treaty between the flyers and the dragon riders, which is also awesome. The thing that kind of made me laugh was Xaden got land and was declared a duke. Rebecca Yarros legit made this man a duke, and I was like, she just wants to make him the most perfect bookman of all time. That's the only thing I can think, because he's already great, but she decides that she has to make him a duke too. I thought that was hilarious. So while they're going through all of the aisles and they're trying to find a cure and they're trying to find Andarna's kind, they meet with a strange little girl that also has silver hair like Violet. This brought up so many questions for me, and a few of them were answered, but I'm really going to ask you guys to kind of enlighten me if I miss something. We also meet Xaden's mother, but we don't get to see a lot of her, so I'm really thinking she's going to come back eventually, maybe in the next book, and we're going to learn a lot more about her. When they do find the other dragons that are like Andarna, they are so rude. Like, oh my gosh, you throw this poor little egg hatchling into a world that you already know is evil, and you expect her to just grow up by herself? That is so sad. Like, who does that? And they're mad at her for the way that she grew up, even though she's a really awesome dragon, but they're mad at her for the way that she grew up because they placed her in that situation. Like, excuse me? Anyway, they really made me mad, and I was so sad for Andarna because she was just heartbroken that they pushed her away and they basically shunned her. While they're talking to Andarna about everything, like they're giving her her whole history and all of that, they say that Andarna shouldn't have given Violet the gift that she did, but we haven't learned Violet's second signet. And then this comes back around after the dragons leave, after Andarna is heartbroken. This comes back around and Violet finds out that she is a dream walker. That's her second signet. Now they call this all-powerful signet and that it's super dangerous, but I kind of didn't understand why it was super dangerous. You do get to learn a little more about that further on in the book, but I still don't understand why it's super dangerous. Like, I don't know if it's just because people are vulnerable when they sleep and she can access their minds while they're vulnerable. I don't know if that's the reason, or if it's because like she can actually physically hurt someone in their dreams. Because that was kind of alluded to when she was in Xaden's dream and the Venin was there and the Venin knew he was in the dream and she knew she was in the dream. It was weird. That I needed to have a little more elaboration on. So if y'all know more about that than I do and I just missed something, let me know, please. But anyway, second signet, dreamwalking. Shortly after this, we have one of the dragons who are like Andarna. They come to save everyone while they're fighting the Venin. Again, there are so many battles with the Venin in this book. So this dragon comes to save them from the Venin and activates a ward stone to protect them. And he's basically asking Andarna to go back to their world with them and learn the ways of her kind. This was super sad. Andarna severs the bond with Violet so she can leave her and not hurt her and goes with her kind. Then we find out that Violet has silver hair because her father tried to dedicate her to a temple. This was also super confusing to me. Please, someone explain what a dedication was and what it meant, because I didn't feel like it was explained that well. It was some kind of betrayal too, but like I said, since I didn't understand the idea of a dedication, I don't understand why it was such a huge betrayal. But anyway, her father did this and that's why her hair turned silver, like the little girl that she met on the Isle. This is about where we get to the final battle, and this is where it starts really picking up. But it's not as epic as Iron Flame, in my opinion. It feels like the random chapters. You get random chapters from Rhiannon, a random chapter from Imogen, and then it's not random, but you get a chapter from Xaden. The Imogen and Rhiannon chapters really threw me off. I didn't feel like they were necessary, and I really didn't like them, to be honest. It really threw me out of the story because I was so used to being in Violet's perspective for so long, besides the chapter from Xaden that we get in Iron Flame, that it took me out of the story instead of dragging me deeper into it. So I did not like those chapters at all. And then shortly after the final battle, after the carnage and everything, Violet is being dragged up the stairs to a celebration party by Imogen. I was confused by this too, just as confused as Violet was. And we find out that Violet has a wedding ring on her finger. Xaden is gone. She has wedding papers and she doesn't remember anything, nothing about the wedding. Andarna is talking to her again, so I was really confused about that. So I'm assuming they rebonded. Taryn is not talking to her, but he's just in a deep sleep to recover. He is alive. Taryn did not die, but like she can't remember the wedding. I don't understand what's happening here. There was so much to process. Like, Andarna's talking, Taryn's not, Xaden's gone, but she has a wedding ring on her finger and doesn't remember anything. And Imogen says that Violet asked her to do it. So I'm assuming that that means Violet asked her to make her forget, but I really don't know. And I'm so confused and I'm really not okay with this because I want to know what happened. And we won't get to know what happened for at least another year and a half. So here I am, and that's how I feel. And that is basically all of the big things that stuck out to me in Onyx Storm with the spoilers. I don't feel as mind blown as I was in Iron Flame, but man, I'm still mind blown. All right, guys, there you have it. There's my recap for Fourth Wing, my recap for Iron Flame, and my spoiler-free and spoiler-full review of Onyx Storm. I really thought it was so crazy how many people were hyped up for this book. I mean, obviously it's a really great series, and I was so excited to see the whole book community just go crazy for it. I am still waiting on my Amazon pre-order, even though I ordered it back in April of last year. They said it wouldn't be delivered until the end of the week on release week, so yeah, I'm really depressed about that. Don't have my special edition hardcover, but other than that, I really enjoyed the book. I stayed up way too late to read it, and I'm feeling like I already need a reread. Y'all, please answer my questions down in the comments because I'm going crazy and I need to know if I just need to go back and listen to the whole thing again to answer my questions or if it just wasn't explained. So leave me a comment down below of what you thought about the book. Subscribe because I always do videos like this. Let's hope that we all don't wither away in anticipation as we wait for the fourth book. Bye, guys.